who don't know me, let me introduce myself. My name is Alex Graham. I'm one of the strength and conditioning coaches for ASDC here at the college. I had the pleasure of getting to meet Jeff this past spring at a course, and then he was kind enough to give me some mentoring over the summer a little bit. So I've learned a lot about him. So a little bit about Jeff. He works as a strength and conditioning coach and physiologist at the Canadian Sports Institute up in Calgary. Jeff holds more degrees than probably this room combined. He's got a degree in general studies, a degree in education from Brandon University. He has a degree in exercise sports science from University of Manitoba, and a master's of kinesiology from University of Calgary. Jeff is a certified strength and conditioning coach from the National Strength and Conditioning Association, as well as a certified exercise physiologist from the Canadian Society of Exercise Physiologists. And you've been at the CSI since 2011, right? About that? Full-time?
Full-time, 2011, yeah, somewhere around there.
All right, so.
Perfect.
There you go.
Thank you. You did a great job. I don't hold that many degrees. It's just I kind of got lost along the way and really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. But it's kind of funny because Corey asked me to come up here and speak to everybody. And I kind of get humbled because I'm like, why does anybody really want to listen to what I have to say? You know, we sit in Calgary at the Canadian Sports Institute, and we're always said, oh, we're the leaders in exercise physiology, and we're the leaders in training athletes. And we kind of sit on the floor, and a few of us go, we're just a bunch of kids still figuring things out. You know, and I still look back, and I guess I get the opportunity to drive here for 3 hours, and a few months ago I drove back to Manitoba, and you kind of got all this 12 hours to think about what you've done with your life. And you kind of think about where you started and where you come from. And I come from a small town in Manitoba where when I start talking about exercise physiology and strength conditioning, I just tell everybody I teach phys ed because they don't get it. It's 300 people in this small town, and they don't understand what I actually do. So I'm going to bring some of the experiences over 10 years that I've had, because I kind of sit back and go, man, we get to see some pretty cool stuff and things that we wouldn't really see on a normal basis. You know, we get the Olympians come in, we get professional athletes come in, and I remember somebody asked me one day, what sporting-wise impresses you? And I said, honestly, nothing. You're jaded. You know, we had a guy come in that trained with us, and he was in the NCAA. He was in the finals in his last year of college, runs in the finals of the NCAA 100 meter, and he's a 10-1 guy. And everybody goes, oh my God, he's so fast. And I was like, yeah, but he doesn't even make Olympic standard. You know, and you start thinking about that, and you're like, oh, you're jaded. We have Olympic lifters that came in from the Team Canada group. The guy front squats 600 pounds, but they're in the B category of Olympic lifting. So we're going to bring experiences of how we start to think about the sports science, the training, and especially along the lines of development, because in the last few years, I've really seen a shift on how I've trained athletes, not from a standpoint of, well, you know, this is what Olympic athletes need to do. It's like, what are the basics that they need to do? And I think we start to get skewed on some of the things that we're seeing in the media and everywhere else. So if I can get this going. So we're going to share collective experiences from my years in sports science. So I've worked in college. I worked at SAIT, and I was there for 2 years with the college programs. I kind of lucked out. I landed there, perfect timing. Men's volleyball, women's basketball, men's hockey and women's hockey all go to nationals and come in either first or second my first year there. So I looked like a champ. My resume is all littered with awards, and I was like, and I had nothing to do with any of it. I had 1 year under my belt. I worked at University of Calgary with some of the Dinos programs like individual athletes and college and athletes within a university setting. I right now have 7 girls that are playing NCAA for me, and they're all random colleges around the states. I've been in development sport for so long, I can't even remember. This is honestly, you'll see from my experiences when I put it all up there, my 20th year in strength conditioning. So I'm 39, and I kind of forget how many years I've been doing this. Olympic athletes now, this is my second quad, full quad with a team, with different teams. And then I have professional athletes as well. And I don't take on a lot of professionals. I remember when I was a kid, I was like, I'm going to take on professional athletes. I can train them. I was like, there's no business. I had no business at the time that I had professional athletes, even working with them. And I'm going to be honest. Everything I tell you today could be wrong in 6 months to 2 years, because we'll find a new way of doing things. I'm constantly adapting and refining. I see a new book, we read it, we critically evaluate it, and we're saying, hey, it's time to try and change things the way we're doing it. I read a book a couple of years ago called Triphasic Training, really enlightened some of the ideas that we had. So we brought that into play. But it was after a lot of critical evaluation of it where we tested the theories, we were on the force plates, we were making sure that the results we're reading in the book were actual results and there's impact in the event itself. And I'm a storyteller, I'm not a presenter. I want people interacting. So if you have a question, don't feel like you can't ask. How many coaches do we have here? Couple. How many athletes do we have? Anybody? Okay. No parents at all? What do you guys do? What do you guys do for sport? How are you involved in sport?
Golf and hockey.
Golf and hockey? Okay.
Workout.
Workout? Cool. I try to. Yeah.
I was telling these guys that these are some of my students, and you were my exercise phys lab instructor.
I was.
Then you got to tell them what power was as a student.
Corey is a great student. I'm just shocked. If you actually saw Corey years ago, he was twice this size. When he was doing his Olympic lifting, I was actually around when Corey was doing Olympic lifting as well with Henrik. And you know, there's experiences that we had over 10 years. Here's this little man, totally side topic story, working at Peak Power, and our boss is sitting there, and this janitor walks into the room and said, I want a job. And Mike kind of looks around going, well, Jim's clean, I don't need a janitor. And he takes out his passports and he starts putting passports to world championship and Olympic events for Olympic lifting. And we're like, oh my gosh. And they hire him to teach Olympic lifting. This is like winning the lottery ticket because you don't get this experience. You don't get a guy who has got a master's in Olympic weightlifting from a Russian federation come to Canada and just work at this tiny little gym. And we've got all these Russian textbooks in my house, and I'm reading all these translated books, and you're like flipping through pages. My wife goes, you're reading that book really fast. I was like, yeah, I talked to Henrik about this, and it's all the stories in this book are just random stories we'd have during the day. You'd ask him, well, Henrik, your back squat ratio to your front squat ratio, what should it be? And it took him an hour to finally just tell me 1-to-1. But he went through the whole science of it. It was fascinating. And these are the experiences you just don't get on every day or in classrooms. If anybody is using any social media, please use the CSI Calgary and my own. CSI Calgary does love some promotional stuff when we do it. We try to get out there. We're not out there as much as we can be. So now, without further ado, I can end my presentation on this.
The whole thing here is about powering podium performances. How can we not arm the coach with the best, the latest and greatest science and expect a podium outcome?
So I mean, like we could play that video and we're just done. And I laugh because somebody goes, oh, like you guys get that all set up. That was a week I was away in Toronto working with one of the hockey teams. And they bring in this film crew and drones and like, it was crazy the amount of production that they had come into that. And everybody goes, oh, you guys set that up just for work. And I was like, no, like honestly, that stuff happens every day. Maybe not the biomechanical on the luge, but they're on the luge paddles every day. The other morning I had a sports school come through and we're doing a video, and the analysis that you can see with the guys doing force plates on the foot, they were doing that for Under Armour. And we're sitting here like, this is actually what happens every day. We had body comp yesterday because we have people recerting. I'm recerting next week as well. So all of us, it's in a pretty amazing facility. We have 35,000 square feet, full physiology lab, recovery labs, medical department that's all built in there. We are beyond spoiled. Our lives have gotten infinitely easier based on the location we're at because we have everything under the sun. So yes, I do hold a lot of degrees. The honest truth is probably this one I could have skipped, but it's my most useful one. I was in an education class. I went through Brandon University. I accidentally ended up on a hockey team there. It's a long story about how I accidentally ended up there, but I followed after I was done playing. We followed the guys over to the education department. We were like, well, we don't know what to do, and we're just going to hop into education. And I was literally second day of my education class. I look around at all these people, and they're all so excited about teaching, and I'm like, what am I doing in here? So I honestly got online, checked out the University of Manitoba, and I was registered the next week for a year in advance. And I said, well, I've already started the degree. I'm not going to stop it. I may as well finish it. Honestly, probably one of my most beneficial degrees because I do get to learn how to communicate and talk with people and react and relate to people. Then I went to University of Manitoba and did my exercise and sports science. And it was fantastic. It was before they called it Kines. Really simple program, I thought, and no, there's no way. It was a lot of work. I ended up getting it done in 3 years because I got to bring some stuff in. But I was in a place called Talisman Center. It's now Repsol. It's a big downtown gym in Calgary when I moved there in 2005. And Pierre Lueders is on the treadmill. And the bobsled team is doing their thing. And there's a few other Olympic athletes, skeleton athletes running around. And I looked at a friend of mine and said, I want to work with them. And he just laughed. He goes, kid, you got to go get a master's degree. I was like, okay, I'll go get a master's degree. Can't be that hard. But I knew my marks were pretty low. I was not a great student. So I, without telling my wife, applied for the kin degree at University of Calgary and thought, well, if they don't tell me that I got in, then I'll find a different route to go that way. And my wife, I'm at work in a small town in Okotoks, and my wife calls me, she goes, when were you going to tell me you got into University of Calgary? I was like, oh boy, I'm in trouble. So she made me go, which is like I wanted to, but it was, she goes, you can't pass this opportunity up. The Master's of Kinesiology degree at that time was a course-based plus a thesis-based, so we did both. And it was fantastic, very integrated sport physiology. And the beauty of it was the program was situated at the University of Calgary along with the Human Performance Lab from the Canadian Sport Institute. So we got to see Olympic athletes all day. And we were in the lab with them and we were working with them. And the oval weight room was right down below. Corey was a practicum student at the oval weight room. We got to go down there and it was our playground. And we were immersed in Olympic athletes and college athletes on a full-time basis. It was amazing. But more than anything, it came down to like the collective experiences that we've had. Like I said, I've been doing this now since 1997. And I've worked in almost every capacity in every type of facility around there. I've been in public and private and individual small training centers. I've been in huge training centers like the Canadian Sport Institute Calgary and college settings. You know, and all the way along, you gather information about how do you process what we do. You know, when I first came out, I'll be honest, I remember my first day of personal training, I walked out and there's athletes and clients standing there. I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, how do we make them work out? I had a program in my hand, but I didn't know how to coach. I didn't know how to train them. But when we got to SAIT, I was lucky enough to be working under a guy by the name of Mike Souster who really helped me learn how to coach. And then under Matt Jordan and Scott Mott at the Canadian Sport Institute and the groups there, we really became immersed in coaching. So I've been with men's hockey, women's hockey since 2008 with both those programs. It kind of helped before they got into Sochi and everything else, Vancouver. Cross-country ski, I drove to Canmore 3 days a week, hour each way to work with athletes. And there would be days leading into events where you get out there and they're going, I'm fried today. Have a good day. Turn around, you just get back in your car, grab a coffee and drive home. You're there for 15 minutes, but you learn how to balance those athletes off. I now work with short track speed skating and long track speed skating on the development side. And what's interesting is I grew up playing hockey. The rest of the sports, water polo, the first time I walked into water polo, I was like, you guys can touch the bottom of the pool, right? And they go, it's 8 feet. And I was like, you tread water for 3 hours? Like, seriously? The best part about being in those sports where you haven't been immersed before is you have to learn them. And you really figure it out. The best way of learning water polo, called me up and said, hey, where's your passport? And I said, well, here's the number. What do you need? We're going to Hungary next week. I was like, we're going where? And we landed in Budapest and they took us to Hungary and they let us watch like professional water polo. We went and took our team to play these guys and you're immersed in it. It was amazing. So 20 years, 10 of it being in high performance. And I think back, like when you started, it wasn't a real profession. Like we made it up. I'm honest to God. Like we come into this, there's no clear path of how do you become a strength coach, how do you be an exercise physiologist. It's relatively a new degree, a new profession. We justified the needs of the sports coaches. You really have to get the buy-in of the coach or those around you to understand, like, what is it that you do? You know, it's not easy to say, well, like I said, I can't even tell people in my hometown what I do, because it's how do you tell them, well, I go to the lab and I poke people's fingers and find out where their lactate levels are, and I design a training program. They're like, why don't you just make them ride a bike? You know, but they don't get how we make things flow. A lot of times, I laughed. I had to go back to a sports school. And I was telling about my first personal training program that was given to me, and it was from my PE coach, or phys ed teacher and coach at the time, and he had a book called Getting Strong. Does anybody remember this book?
Bill Pearl?
Bill Pearl. And it's this yellow book. It's about this thick. And he goes, turn to page 12. And you turn to page 12, and it's got your sport on it. And he goes, just follow that. And it's like, it was just isolated exercises. And I look at some of the kids that come in to see us now for training. It's like, wow, I was a moderate athlete. I would have been, you know, just a little bit better if I would have had somebody actually tell me how to do it. So it's been really interesting to see the evolution of this. And now there's degrees that are right around what we do from an exercise physiology standpoint. They have a master's of coaching at University of Victoria, where they teach you how to coach at a master's level. It's amazing. Great book by Franz Bosch. And it's interesting, he talked about the paradigms of strength conditioning. Physiotherapy, bodybuilding, and exercise physiology is what made up training before. And I can tell you right now, Bill Pearl's book was all bodybuilding. And then you have somebody who was a physiotherapist at the time and would say, hey, you need to do this for training, but it's all around corrective exercises. And then you had people who were pure exercise physiologists working in endurance sport. And I think back to a gentleman by the name of Dave Smith, he's been in the Canadian Sport Institute system for probably about 30 years now. Pure physiology. And had athletes, you know, you got to get strong. Well, you're going to get strength from riding the bike, and you'll get a physiology effect out of that. And now I think of our job, and it's like my programs are just a blend of, I would say, strength training, not bodybuilding, because we really don't do that anymore. Physiotherapy exercises, we mix them in, and pure physiology. And I spend a lot of my time, and you notice in the sports that are kind of the multi-sport, hockey, which is multiple energy systems plus strength, water polo, which is brute strength and multiple energy systems. Cross-country ski is where I learned my most, because I couldn't just take someone in and say, hey, we're going to make you big and strong, because the bigger you were, the more mass you had to carry up the hill. And they were like, that doesn't quite work. So now, rarely were the three in conjunction, and now it's a blend. Everything's in one place. And once again, we're extremely lucky that when somebody's hurt, I say, go see physio, go see the doctor. And then the physio comes on the floor with me and says, here's the exercise I put out. If you're the coach in a small environment, you might be, okay, I got to find something to help this person's shoulder. I have to find something to help this person's hip. And you're trying to be multiple hats at the same time. I've been able to remove a couple hats and keep only 2 or 3 on. Any questions so far? Kind of a ramble of everything we've been doing up until now. I always put this one up. How many kids that you work with, or do you see, this is the effect of training? Honestly, this has been one of the hardest things to work past now, because this is readily available. I can hop on my phone and I can see 8 million different training programs at any one point in time. I can see 10 different ways to do an exercise. All I need is internet access and my phone, and I can put any exercise up on the web without anybody critiquing how I did it. And that's a scary thought, because I know our athletes go, oh, I Googled this exercise. I was like, oh my God, like, which one did you Google? And you try and put links up, and to put all the exercises you have in a program onto a web-based server is a lot of work. But, you know, we got athletes that come in, they already have this preconceived notion of what I should do. So like how many people follow, like I follow all the gym memes and everything else. One, they're hilarious, but it's right there. You know, and the thing is with that is anybody can become a professional. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I love the idea behind fitness, but when it's readily available and people see the snippets, and I always use the example like right now we're in a big push towards the Olympics, and at any point in time we have 1 to 2 film crews coming through either daily or weekly. And when you watch the Olympics coming up, they're going to go to Pyeongchang, they're going to have all this beautiful video from, I believe it's CBC this year. And what's going to happen? They're going to show snippets of athletes training, but they don't show what they do on a daily basis. What they end up showing is the cool stuff, the exciting stuff. They don't show them, oh, they did physio exercises for an hour because they're broken. They didn't show them riding on the bike for 25 minutes at the lowest cadence ever because they need to build aerobic base. They're showing them deadlifting 400 pounds. They show them clean and jerking 300 pounds. They don't want to see them doing the boring stuff. And that's where social media is a snippet. It's a snapshot in time of what you're watching. I love watching CrossFit. I don't do it anymore because I pretty severe injury a few years ago doing it. But I love watching all this stuff. And you see these guys lifting crazy amounts of weight, and like the Twitter feeds are awesome for that. But when you watch these things, like I said, you're only seeing these little glimpses of into the world. You don't see how much extra training goes into it. So we're going to kind of go past all this into some of the training effects. Has anybody ever read a book called Athletic Development by Vern Gambetta? I would suggest picking that book up. I'm extremely biased. I was in Colorado Springs at a conference for dartfish. We're there learning how to work the whole system, and we got a little break, and I've got Vern's book out, and I'm flipping through it. And this guy, old guy next to me goes, how's that book? I was like, awesome. Like, you know, everything in here. Money. There's great articles of what to do when, all the diagrams. And he goes, maybe I'll take my wife out for dinner. And I look over and I was like, flip the book over. And it's Vern Gambetta sitting next to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, will you sign my book? He goes, no. You gotta go for lunch first. The first time in my life I zipped up, didn't say a single word, and listened to this man for an hour. He's got great ideas around training. A lot of his book is based around track work and track training. And the process of evaluating and training all the components of athleticism according to the demands of the sport and the qualities of individual athletes. It's based on the understanding that athleticism is the ability to perform athletic movements, run, jump, and throw at optimal speed with precision, style, and grace. I always put these up for one simple fact, and I keep telling people this. There is nothing that I do in a weight room at the CSI that'll make somebody a better ex-athlete, okay? Better hockey player, a better speed skater. There's nothing. All I'm doing is building athletic skills, athletic qualities to support them in their daily training environment. That was one thing I never got. I was like, oh, I can make you a better hockey player, I'm gonna make you squat. And it never would translate. I never figured it out. And you start realizing it's not just about the individual exercises. You are building a giant toolbox for this athlete to be able to go into their daily training environment, and their coach is gonna make them a better athlete. Not me. I make them lift some weight. Other than Olympic weightlifting, there's nothing that we do in the weight room that translates to sport directly, other than pure athleticism. Okay, that makes sense? Any questions? And these two. Life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated. And I love the one by Schumacher, is any intelligent fool can make things bigger, more complex, and more violent. It takes a thought of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. We, as professionals, have made this job way more complicated than it has to be. We've overthought it. You know, and we're the biggest ones to blame where I work. Because if it doesn't exist in a research article, we can't do it. And in most cases, I'm going to say it, research articles are amazing. But they're a couple of years behind because by the time they get published, we're moved on to something else. And a lot of times the weight room is ahead of the schedule of what those published articles are. We're trying things. It's about being creative and being critical evaluation of those things. But we have really complicated the whole entire process of strength conditioning. Anybody ever get to hear John Herdman speak? Oh,
he's amazing.
I just wanted to hug the man. Like the guy was, well, I'd have to go like this because he's really little. However, he came to the University of Calgary and spoke, and I took this slide, and I'm going to give him 100% credit for it because he summed it up. And we all think that we got to run 100% all the time. And it just doesn't work. And I started thinking about this on how our athletes train. And when I explained to my athletes, I was like, you're on this path to greatness. We're all going to get to where we need to go. We're all going to develop a program. You're going to get the adaptations you need. You'll become as strong as you need. You'll be as fit as you need if we do the right program, but you can't just go 100% head first into the wall. It doesn't work. So the way he put it is, we need to do that 80% of the time. We need to be good. We have to be doing things well 80% of the time. Build this big base. So when we get to that 80, with that 20% where we have to be amazing, we have the foundation. It's funny, I sat down in a office the other day with Dr. David Smith, and we're talking about speed development for short track speed skating. Our athletes are doing laps at, the guys are around 9 seconds of a hockey rink. Extremely quick. And they're going, well, to work speed, you need to work speed. You have to do more speed. He goes, how do you build a house? On mud or on foundation? I said, on foundation. He goes, you have to have aerobic base. 80% of the time, he goes, you have to be doing aerobic base. You don't touch speed all the time. He goes, you know that old commercial, speed kills? He goes, well, it's the same thing in speed skating. You have to have a big base for them to be able to put that onto. And I really started to look at this graph or this slide and go, you're right. If we're doing things really well 80% of the time, that 20% when we need it, and we touch those qualities of speed and strength, but we're not always maxing out, the athletes are able to handle the training and excel at the training. Okay, let's get into some fun stuff now. I would say it's doing the basics very well. We're going to do a little case study, and then you guys are going to tell me how I'm going to train this kid. This is actually one of my athletes. He's now 20, and he's touching 227. I'm getting him there. Okay, he's a professional baseball player. He's a pitcher. He's 20 and 225. We're going to watch this a couple times. Okay. I wasn't catching from that day. I did catch from today. .92 miles an hour, 19 years old. He's already in his third year of professional baseball. He's going to play in he'll play AAA and big leagues next year. What do I do with him? I got to train him. He's got to get, there's things he's got to work on. What would I work on there? Give me some ideas. Alex, come on. What would you do with a guy like that?
I don't know.
Sure you do.
Not break him, for starts.
Keep him from killing himself.
Bingo, number one. He's 19 years old, and if I was leaving this morning, he was there, and I sent one guy upstairs, I said, 160. He's only allowed to deadlift 160. He comes down there, and I told him, I said, Mike, no more than 160. I walked out the door, my buddy comes downstairs, texts me, 180. I was like, I knew it. I knew he was doing it, and he was already up to 180 because he's a young kid. He just wants to go. He came up to me last year. He goes, I got to be 235. I said, you want 10 pounds? He goes, yep, and his pitching coach was in town. And he goes, what do you think? I said, well, if that 135 gets him 5 more miles on his fastball, I'll let him get to 135. He goes, I like your answer. He goes, oh, you don't need to be. What are the qualities that I have to have for a pitcher? You guys.
Flexibility.
Bingo. Flexibility. 1. What else?
Power development.
Power development. It's an extremely quick movement. What's that? Glutes. His rule, the bigger the glutes, the bigger the paycheck. That's what he said, the pitcher's rule. Okay? What else do I do with him? The students in the back. Give me some example. What would you work on with this guy? Oh, yeah, you know. The basics. You know what he did yesterday? Conditioning. And he looks at me, he goes, are you kidding me? I gotta run? He goes, you know what I do for a sport? I said, you realize your sport is 2 hours long? He goes, no, it isn't. He goes, it's half a second. I said, yeah, repeatedly for 7 innings or 2 hours. Mental performance. What happens when you're fatigued?
Everything declines.
declines, and this starts to go. I didn't realize how cerebral pitching is when he's sitting here talking to one of the bobsledders, and he had this kid tied up in knots, like the kid just like couldn't believe what he's saying. He goes, well, if I have a guy in the box and he's got a 3-1 pitch count, and I've got a guy on first and a guy on second, and this guy bats from this side of the plate, and I've thrown this number of balls and strikes in what area, and we're like, you're Rain Man for baseball. And I realized if he isn't on his game and he isn't fit enough, that aspect of his mental acuity to be able to figure out what pitch he's got on and know every combination on the field goes down. So I talked to his big league strength coach and director of sport performance. He's with the Atlanta Braves, and they said he needs work capacity. He needs to build his aerobic engine. And I laughed, and I sent him I sent a picture of that email. I captured it on my phone. I texted him that night. He goes, yeah. And he's doing conditioning. Honestly, he's still a 19-year-old kid. He's growing. I really work on the basics. The Olympic lifting course that Alex and I took this year was a huge benefit for us. Power development. He's not allowed to do overhead presses. That's one thing they take out because they said it's about shoulder. There's a big thing on shoulders worries. I was lucky enough. Do you know the name Eric Cressey? Anybody? If you haven't checked him out, he's an amazing strength coach from Florida. A friend of mine went to go see him after. He was in the Olympics and got broken. Like his body was falling apart. He went to go see Eric, and he linked us up together. And I had a one-on-one conversation for an hour with Eric, and it was fantastic. So now he has agreed to do a webinar for us, and at some point he's going to come visit. I know, I'm super excited. When he comes for the visit and he does a presentation, I'll let you know. He talked about, how do you work the shoulder without doing overhead pressing? So we work on a lot of basics, and his program is not difficult. He comes in, he gets mobile, he does a little bit of Olympic lifting. He is a very in-tuned athlete. He comes in and basically sent me the YTP. He goes, this is what I want to do. I want to do eccentric training. I want to do isometric training. I looked at his program, I was like, it's actually not bad. But he's had a lot of good strength coaches along the way that have guided him. So we went back to the basic principles. He needs conditioning, mobility. Is he broken? We do a quick assessment on him, and a specific functional movement assessment, so the SFMA, which is a step up from the FMS. And we just build a nice little program for him. Trains 4 days a week. And it's nothing that you'd be looking at going, oh, this is really ingenious. He squats. He does some single leg work. He does some plyometrics. We just hit every body part. And that's it. And everybody goes, that's all you're doing with him? I was like, yeah. The only thing we really monitor with him is how much grip work he's doing. And the only reason I realized that was he came in one time, we do a lot of farmer carries because he said, hey, I got to have good, strong forearms. So we do the farmer carries, and it was about 2 weeks later, he goes, we're playing catch, and he goes, hey, we got to stop the farmer carries. I said, why? He goes, I'm losing he calls it this. He says, it's this feel. I know exactly when he says this. He comes in, about 2 days later, his forearms are starting to feel better, and he let one go. And I could see on his face, he threw it, and he went, and when it hit me in the glove, I was like, yep, we're done. He goes, why? Are you okay? I was like, yeah. He goes, man, I'm sorry because I let that one go. He goes, I felt about 92, 93. And I'm not wearing gear. I'm honestly setting up like this so nothing here gets hit, and I got the glove in front of my face because if I take one of the ribs, I should be okay. But he goes, I felt it again. So you get these little things, you get these little idiosyncrasies you figure out along the way with these athletes. But honestly, with him, it's the basics. And that's all my athletes. We assess what they need to do. It's not very difficult when you critically evaluate the programs. I love this slide because Dr. Smith always talked about this one in our grad program. Think back to the athletes. You might really like this one too, because if you think of the athletes through as 4 distinct types, we've got our thoroughbreds. They have high work ethic and high talent. Hardworking, everything comes easy to them. They crush the weight room. They get into the training environment, and everything is they make it look beautiful. Right now, one of our track coaches works with Damian Warner. When he runs, in my head, that's what I look like. In real life, I look like I'm being shot 1,000,000 times in the back of the calves because it's the most awful to watch me run. He's got high work ethic. He's got high talent. He makes everything look effortless. We have a bolter. I have athletes like this in some of my groups that are high talent. They can turn it on any point in time. I had a couple water polo guys. We just pass them the ball, and sure enough, it turns into a goal every single time he touched the ball. But came to the weight room, practice, I'm not feeling good, and right away you'd just take a look outside the door and you'd see him zipping out. Hated training. He was a game guy. Just put me in the game. That's all I want to do. Wooden horse. Low talent, low work ethic. And you know what? We have to have some of those athletes on the team. Those are the kids that tend to be good teammates. They sometimes know where they stand, but honestly, they're there as support. They do a great job of bringing fun into the environment. They're going to, try and work their butt off when they want, but honestly, they're good in the environment. Workhorses, high work ethic, low talent. I asked Doc Smith about that. I was like, Doc, do you win more gold medals with a thoroughbred or bolter or a workhorse? He goes, if I could, I'd take a workhorse every time. He goes, I have more gold medals from workhorses than I've ever had from a thoroughbred, because they're there to put the time needed and the work into it. And it's amazing. We can think of all the athletes across the board. And that's what makes the Olympics very special for us, because we know all these athletes. Like the video, you saw athletes like John Morris and Jesse Lumsden, and you were talking about Kaylee Humphries before, and you see all these athletes in there. So the stories become a lot different because you know the amount of work they put in. And a lot of these athletes, I would say, in the Olympics are here. You got some that are just, they'll trudge it out. And it's going to suck, and they know it, but they put so much work and time in that it pays off in the end because they're willing to do that slow process. So at no point is this next slide related in quadrants, but have you heard the name Dan John? If you haven't, it's a fantastic guy to follow online. He's a throws coach out of Utah. He has a book called Easy Strength. One of the best training books you could ever buy. Okay, pick it up. I should get royalties for that book because I've probably sold 1 million copies for him. He breaks everything into quadrants, and I think when you start looking at how to train a sport, you have to start thinking of the quadrants themselves. Look at quad 1. It's many qualities at low level of max. We're trying to build a big, broad base, and unfortunately, we're hoping that's done in the phys ed class. But let's be honest, I had my education degree, and the reason I left education and do what I do now is because phys ed wasn't doing it. It's changed so much. When we were kids, we had to be like, I'm 39, we had to be all-around athletes. I grew up in that small town. If I wasn't playing or one of my friends wasn't playing, well, there wasn't a team because you needed 6 guys or you needed 9 guys. We had no choice. We had to be all-around athletes. Even if you're terrible at it, you figured it out. So when you're training, you're thinking, well, you have to touch on quad 1. How do you build some of those qualities into your daily training environment for athletes? It has to be there. We need them to be able to run, jump, throw, how to work in a team environment, hop, skip. I think they used to do that Canadian fitness test with the 1 mile run and the beanbag toss and just vertical jump. Those simple skills. And I can be honest, I work in sports schools now, and I watch this, and I have the sports school I work at has athletes that are identified in their individual sport, and they're following this for a long time. They can't do the basics. They can't do an A-skip. My water polo guy, I have a water polo guy that honestly runs like this. He was never taught to run. He's so turned out, and it's painful to watch. We're like, just, no, you're not running today. Our other athletes will watch the water polo team and just cringe because they're like, they can't move on land because they've been specialized in their sport for so long. In quad 2, this is our team sports where we look at many qualities at a high level of relative max. You're playing any sport, you have to be very good at everything in your sport to excel at it. Let's say basketball. Well, you can't just be, the free throw guy. That'd be awesome. You just get subbed in, do the free throws, and then you just disappear. Be an awesome gig if you could. Football, you can't just, there's only one guy who's place kicking. So you have to have a lot of qualities, but it's at a high level max because team sports are fast, they're dynamic. You have to figure that out. How to set those qualities in. And everybody goes, oh, that's where I want to train. I want to train many qualities at a high level of max. I want to be able to, be explosive. I want to have a big aerobic engine. I want to have anaerobic power, alactic, capacity to do work. And you're like, well, let's just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. You can't. It doesn't work. I'm going to skip straight to quad 4, where you have few qualities at the highest level of max. This is where, according to Dan John, and you read that book, the freaks live. Okay? And I can say that with all heart to say, bobsled are freakishly strong. Okay? They come in, they do one thing really well. They push a sled. They lift and they sprint, and that is it. And they will do one sprint and they'll wait for 20 minutes before they do another sprint again. It's one or two qualities you work on. We were really lucky to have Derek Evely speak to us at work. He came on Skype to talk to us. He lived with Anatoly Bondarchuk, who was Dylan Armstrong's throws coach. Dylan Armstrong's one of the best shot putters in the world at the time. That's one quality. He goes, you know what we did? We go out and throw a shot. And then we lift some weights. And we go throw more shot. And we go, and he goes, we'd throw 8-pound shot. We'd throw 10-pound shot. And he goes, it was the easiest program ever. But he goes, we have one quality to do. That's all he had to worry about was throwing shot. Very difficult. It's taken me 10 years to figure out how to make this work. Quad 3 is where we do all our training. Okay? That's why I got myself a little animated star. Few qualities and low or moderate levels of max. That's where training lives. Simple fact, I'm going to build one or two qualities. We're going to touch on some of the higher end qualities, but we're going to really focus on one thing. And that's where our world's very different. When you start looking at the world of just personal training, bodybuilding, people are kind of doing a lot of everything. We simplify it down. We'll identify with an athlete. They need aerobic base. Are they still going to train with the rest of the team? Sure they are. But their primary focus of their program is going to sit around building that aerobic base up. We might have some athletes that are just upper body weak. They're going to focus more on upper body strength. Do they touch on the other qualities? Well, of course they do. But you're focusing on one quality until you build that up. And then you maintain that and you build up the next quality. That's why it takes a long time. But when you spend all this time and effort in here and you start putting all these qualities on top of each other, and you start understanding how to layer that cake well, it makes a pretty beautiful cake at the end. And that's why, if we go back to the other slide, and you have people who are the workhorses, who are willing to put all that time and effort in, pays off in the end. Because that's where you spend all your time building the quality slowly, instead of just kind of going, let's do everything. We think of the interference model. Ben Spohr out of UBC had a great model saying, you can do certain qualities that don't interfere, and these ones interfere. But if you don't have the basic understanding of the physiology and how that interacts, it becomes very difficult. So then you're kind of guessing what happens. Whereas when you're doing it in this method, you're predicting how long it's going to take for that quality to happen, and then you move on to the next quality, still maintaining along the way. Any questions so far? Because I've thrown a lot of information at everybody. Everything making sense? Do I need to explain anything deeper? This is my baby. We had a philosophy chart, and the guys kind of put this in little chunks. And we started tweaking it over the years. And honestly, this is our beautiful mind at the CSI. This is how our philosophy chart works. It's very simple. We are building all our qualities. I'm going to spend a lot of time here, and then we're going to flip it totally on its head. Our performance foundation, we're talking about health. That's lifestyle choices, nutrition, their sleep patterns, all of that. If you do not work on that first, who cares what you do above it? I remember my first year in water polo, one of the guys would walk in as our goalie. And he'd walk in, and he'd be just wrecked every morning. And I'd be like, what's going on? I'm really tired. What can you do today? Well, I can't do much. And this is now going on its second week, and I was like, should we get him in to see the docs? And one guy goes, no, you don't get him in to see the docs. He's on League of Legends. I was like, he's doing what? He's playing League of Legends. Online? Yeah. At what time? Well, with the Korean guys. At 4 in the morning. I ripped into him. I was like, seriously, you're trying to be a national team athlete and that's the problem? And we found out this is not just isolated instances. These athletes who go on tour, there's not a lot to do in middle of Latvia. Okay? They're playing online video games or watching movies or Netflix at 4 in the morning because their times are all screwed up and they're not getting their sleep. And then they're wondering why I can't perform in the morning. Okay? So we start looking at that. Our nutrition. If you're a coach or one of the professionals working with a team, one of the biggest things we say, if you have anybody under the age of 18, don't just do the nutrition sessions with the kids, engage the parent because they're the ones buying the food. Or they're going to be the ones that are reminding the kid, hey, did you pack your snacks today? Be shocked at how many times we have to remind the guys, hey, you know, you're going from the weight room to the pool, you should have something to eat because it's a 4-hour, period. And we got to tell adults this. So we look at how's the nutrition going. We're lucky enough, once again, make friends with a nutritionist in town or within the college that you can interact with because that is the biggest thing. I remember asking Dave Smith, if we cleaned up sleep and nutrition, he goes, we'd all be out of jobs because they wouldn't have to do half the training they do. We're trying to undo everything, the poor things they're doing. We start talking about mobility and integrated function. When we say integrated function, do you know how to move well? Can you just move? Honestly, I've got kids that come in to do the sports school and we'll tell them, hey, can you go in and just do a simple squat movement? And you'd be shocked at how many kids have to go like this to get their feet. They have no ankle mobility. And I'm like, I'm an old man. I'm 39. I've got injuries galore. And you guys are 14, 15 years old and they can't move. So we start looking at how well does the body move. And honestly, we have times where one of my coworkers, he has athletes that come in. They get so frustrated because they spend the first 3 months with him just doing mobility and body weight exercises and squatting a dowel. And they don't even touch weights. They're learning how to do an A-skip properly. And it frustrates them until they start to get that. Then he gives them another carrot going, okay, well, we can go a little bit further. But honestly, he goes, well, how are you supposed to build all these other abilities on top of someone who can't move well? We've all seen the squats. You guys have seen the squats on gym memes for sure. That, man, structural tolerance of the body. We'll start talking about structural tolerance. That body can withstand anything because if that guy can move in that way and not blow up, then he's a champ. I'm going to really throw this one out with athletic literacy. The big buzzword for the last couple of years has been physical literacy. I love it, but what is it? And I've argued this because Dr. Dean Creelars, who's kind of coined the term physical literacy, was a former prof of mine at University of Manitoba. And I went to a conference with him and I was like, well, explain physical literacy to me. He goes, well, you can run, jump, throw, hop, skip, do all those activities on multiple surfaces and in different environments. And I was like, great. How's your handbook look? Well, we don't have one. It's a really nice coined term. Great, let's do physical literacy. But you know where physical literacy belonged? In phys ed. But we've cut that. So now we're missing all this physical literacy. So we call it athletic literacy because honestly, I don't have a gym that I can go and play basketball and I'm not going to take them out to skate and I'm not going to take them out to go, run in muddy water. It's a beautiful thought, but physical literacy, I'm going to recoin it with athletic literacy and we're going to break that down right away. So we start blending into performance preparation. We start talking about general abilities. Your ability to squat, push, pull, do the Olympic lifts, the basics. Do you have the aerobic capacity? And the reason I've got aerobic capacity, structural tolerance, and work capacity all built in the background is that can never, ever take precedence, or not take precedence over this. This is not going to take precedence over building aerobic capacity, especially at young ages. Their engine can still adapt. And I regret it to this day. I hated cardiovascular activity when I was a kid. I never did it. And now my ability to change my cardiovascular system, it's tapped out. 25 years old, that's set. So we say have a big aerobic base. Maintain that aerobic base at all times. When I say structural tolerance, it's just a term we use at the Canadian Sport Institute to say Can your body withstand everything we're going to throw at it? Do you have the ability to squat? Do you have the ability to go through the weight room? You know, you're going to be a little bit sore, but do you rebound the next day? And you can do the activity again. You know, so we say structural tolerance is just the body's ability to be robust and handle all its loading. And work capacity. Can you do a large amount of work in a period of time? Because we've got a lot of athletes, hey, they can crush a hard workout, but then it takes them 2 days to come back. We've all had those athletes, they go in the weight room, smash themselves, and then we don't see them for a week later. You know, and it's difficult. You have to be able to repeat those activities when needed. And then we get to the performance optimization. We're going to say sport-driven physical abilities. What does that mean? I'm going to show you momentarily. But honestly, this is where everybody wants to train. I want to do the Olympic lifting. I want to do speed, power. Yeah, you haven't slept. You have no ankle mobility. Your back's a mess. You don't even know how to do an A run, but you want to do this. I'll never forget, Damian Warner's track coach is teaching one of the classes, and this kid comes in, he goes, I don't see why I need to know how to run. I'm a downhill skier. And he's Russian, he goes, stupid. You want to throw yourself downhill at 120 miles an hour, but you don't know how to put your foot in front of the other. And he just walked away. And he's right. You know, you have to have the basics. So, let's make this really complicated. I'm going to send this out to Corey so he can distribute this. Like we said, health, lifestyle, nutrition, sleep, education. I used to have a training group that would come in from the sports school. My rule of thumb, training starts at 2:30 to 3:30. There's a window in there. Your homework has to be done. You have to come and show it to me before you're allowed to step in the weight room. That's all my high school kids. And I'd see them just crushing homework right before. 2:30 to 3:30, crushing homework so they can get in the weight room. And that was rules. General strength, mobility, integrated function. We say general strength. Can you move your body? Can you do your push-ups? Can you do basic pull-ups or modified pull-ups? We're talking just general strength. We're not talking about maximal strength. You know, do you have the physical ability to move yourself well? When I say athletic literacy, we start breaking it down even further into rudimentary movements, the gait, bending, twisting, swinging, stretching, balancing. I have had so many athletes who can't do a forward roll. Like, how do you forget to do a forward roll? Other than I get really dizzy right now, but man, we put the big crash mat out and just let our athletes just do flips. And my water polo guys are like, why? Because you need to know where your body is in space. It's a real simple concept, but they don't get it. You know, and it's a hard thing to integrate. Whereas we have our freestyle athletes we work with, man, we watch them on the trampoline and everybody goes, I'd honestly smash my face into the trampoline because they just are doing every type of flip and corkscrew and they're landing it. No problems at all. So rudimentary movements, how well do you move? We have one strength coach that will watch people walk for 15 minutes before they even start their training session. And he does a perfect strength coach stance. This one here where he leans back because I think if you just get that little extra inch, you get a better view. But he'll watch him walk and go, yeah, your ankle's not moving well. Let's have a look at that. Foundational. Can you squat, lunge, push, pull, lift, and hinge? Nothing magic about those movements. Very basic movements. When I say lift, hinge, this position here. If anybody's read any of Paul Chek's movements, he has the 6 movements of a Neanderthal. Basically, it's that. He goes, if you're a Neanderthal, you'd have to be able to squat, push, pull, lunge, twist, bend, and rotate. Perfect. And if you built any program around that, guaranteed you have success. Because if anybody can do that well, they're going to be perfectly fine. We start talking about linear acceleration and deceleration. Everybody wants to go fast that way, but you know what they forget to do? I got to slow down. My baseball guy, he's throwing a ball at 96 miles an hour. This is his accelerator. Where's the brake? On his back. I spent so much time on the structural tolerance and strength of his back just so he doesn't blow his shoulder clean out. because I think of how fast that arm's got to move. And then when he's done, yeah, he's stepping through, but it's still slowing him down. So you start thinking of that aspect going, well, what do they need to do in their sport? I'll never forget when I was still at Talisman Center, we had this thing called the Frappia Acceleration. If anybody knew what it was Frappia was a group out of Minnesota, and they had high-speed treadmills and high-speed skate treadmills. They were awesome. These high-speed treadmills were heavy-duty, industrial, 36-mile-an-hour treadmills. Wow, man, you should be able to learn how to move pretty fast on that thing. And we had guys moving on there, and we had kids on skate treadmills. And when we were young and thought we knew everything in the world, get them on a skate treadmill, and they would just crush workouts on there. First 2 weeks on the ice, everybody's hamstrings are gone. I was like, what is going on? Yep, get on a treadmill, put your foot here, big strong hip flexor, and it pulls you back. And all you have to do is just have a good hip flexor and it just keeps flinging that foot back. You don't have to do any drive. We had a high-speed treadmill at CSI, and they came back and somebody goes, well, why aren't you using a high-speed treadmill? And we had moved it out the door, and we're just waiting for somebody to come take it. We have a track. Put spikes on, get on the track, learn how to drive. We teach, all my programs for the first month of the program to 2 months is all on how to stop your body from moving. Deceleration. Plyometrics from a drop jump. Can you absorb force? Do you know how to slow down? What are the muscles that are allowing you to slow down? The hamstrings, the glutes in the back. So that we're not blowing up. So that before they even get into accelerating themselves fast, they know how to stop. That not only comes from linear, but now we start looking at linear lateral acceleration decel. Can they skip? Can they jump? Can they hop? Can they bound? I would love to be able to show you a bound, but my athletes are just in tears when I actually try to bound because I was not a track guy. So I always look to the track guy going, hey, show them how to bound. Because our bobsledders, when they, most of them are track athletes, and you watch them bound. Our decathlon group, they make everything look like gazelles in the forest. And me, more like a gorilla crawling across the ground. Then we start looking at multi-directional, like singular, lateral movements, crossovers, pushes, pivots. So we break that down. And then we start looking at multi-directional, multi-angled. So my programs really start off, and I know I talked to the guy from Atlanta the other day. He was like, well, a lot of sagittal plane stuff, you're just straight ahead. I was like, yeah, because we'll start getting into multi-directional as the year goes on. No use just doing everything right off the start. Can you do everything in a sagittal plane first? And then we start getting into change of direction. General, increasing load of the change of direction. So we just do general change of direction movements. Can you increase the load now? How far, how much distance are they dropping? Or how much weight are they moving across change of direction? Then we start adding competitive. Okay, so now you're playing against a person, reactive drills. Now we're starting to add a reaction thing in. And linear acceleration, deceleration. What's the most common used tool in change of direction with athletic populations? Anybody know? It's one tool. Every strength coach carries one in his bag when he was younger. You don't take one out and roll it out? The agility ladder. I love it. And all my kids go, I've had dads come in, well, we need my kid to do some more agility ladder. I was like, yeah? Do you know how to dance? He goes, what kind of stupid question is that? I was like, can you two-step? He goes, well, of course I can. Well, so's the agility ladder. I haven't danced in a long time. I had to teach social dance in one of my practicums at teaching. And the honest truth is about the agility ladder is when you're doing the agility ladder, it's a pattern. You learn this pattern. It's a motor pattern to the brain telling the body how to move. Same thing as it is for dancing. In no sport do you do a set known pattern. No hockey game's the same. No water polo game's the same. They're all different. So what I tell the guys is you have to have an aspect of cognitive thinking in the middle of your agility drill so you know what you're doing. So I might have them doing the agility ladder, but I'm throwing a tennis ball at them. Or I'll be throwing a different colored ball at them. I said, no, you only catch the red ones. And I'll throw a couple different ones at them. And they're trying to figure out which one to catch. And you watch that motor pattern slow down because now they got to think a little bit. Now the brain's going and they're going, I don't know what to do. That's agility, not just saying, hey, I'm going to go and do this pattern and rattle it off real quick and make it look fancy when there's no aspect of thinking behind it. Because every sport, you have to be thinking. Unless you're doing a singular sport like throwing a discus, the only thing thinking in your head is, as far as I can go. And that's all adding movement awareness in the background. So that's a big slide. This took us a long time to come up with all the aspects. Movement pattern, competency, and refinement, and the Olympic lifting. So can you just do your basic movement patterns? Then we get to the fun stuff. The maximal strength, explosive strength, alactic capacity and power, aerobic power. How do we put that all into a program? Well, that could be a whole separate class. Sport-specific endurance and speed, but that's all based on the demands of the sport itself. You can't sit there and go, oh, we're just going to do it. Well, what does the sport need? I might have a sport that doesn't demand, a massive aerobic power. You have an aerobic base. Bobsled does not take a massive aerobic power. Maximal strength, explosive strength. So you base it on the demands of the sport. We are trying to add in that training age as well. So as they shift, the closer you get to your 8 years plus, the more you spend in the sport specific. Because there are times where you still have to get all your basic work in within those first few years. Okay? Training programs, simple as effective. They need to be a clear plan. Aspect of the plan cannot be explained, then they probably don't need it in the program. Honestly, if you can't explain it in a program or understand why it's there, we don't put it in. We always ask, what's the adaptation? Because the last thing I write in a program is the actual exercise. I always put my whole adaptation based on my reps, my sets, my loading, the conditioning sequences we put in, how much time are they spending in each training zone before I even touch the exercise itself. Okay? Any questions so far? This is a big slide that I'm going to send out, but basically, if you want pain, learn Muay Thai. If you want to learn about failure, play golf. If you want to vomit, drink syrup, have Epicac. If you want to become stronger, more fit, train appropriately. I watch way too many young strength coaches just absolutely decimate their kids, thinking that they're getting an adaptation. Just because you sweat, just because you do a hard workout, that's not training. That's exercise. That's basically what the top one is telling you about. Exercise and training are very different, and training is very calculated, and you understand why you're putting things in and at what point are you putting in. I watch too many classes, and I know that's, once again, onto the social media. I've got a lot of friends who are trying to say, hey, I do personal training. Well, let's see what you do. And I look at their workouts, I was like, who survives that? Like, I wouldn't be able to walk for 2 days after that, but it's just a hard workout. Well, but at the end of the day, you don't understand how long it takes you to recover from that. And the issue is going to be it takes you that long to recover, and now you're missing 2-3 days of training. There's a balance point to that. I always love that. That's in Dan John's book. I love that. Brian Petty put it perfectly. Specificity. God, I'd like to say this wasn't my video, but it is. What are we mimicking?
Swimming.
Yeah. The coach at the time said, that's sport specific. I said, nope, sport specific is in the pool. You want to learn to swim? Swim. Don't do circus tricks. I'm not against specificity. But historically, when I say about specificity, there's times where you do play a sport. This is some really interesting information that we've been able to gather from Hockey Canada. Every year in July, they bring 111 to 112 of the top under 16 guys in the country, under 17 guys in the country to Calgary. And we're allowed to test them. So we put together a very basic, broad range of tests based on aerobic. They do a beep test. They do jumps. They do agility. They do a med ball toss. And one more. I'd have to think of what that one was. Sprint, sorry. In 2014, 2015, I haven't been able to combine everything yet. 2014, 15, what we did was as they tested, all the results would come in. I rank every test, who's the top tester in each test, who's overall fittest in camp. In October, the teams that are from the top 112, we make 3 teams of top 66. Those 66 players are then taken. I re-evaluate where they all sit in their rankings. Are they top? Are the kids who make the team, are you at the top? Are you doing well on every single test? You're smashing every test out. Of the top third, the top echelon of those groups, only 16% of the kids are crushing every test. We have a group that down here, 20% that are terrible on every test. The middle third are doing well on every test, right across the board. 2016, same thing. Nearly identical numbers. And I showed this to Tom Rennie, and Tom Rennie goes, so what you're telling me is you don't want hockey players, you want athletes? I was like, exactly. What's interesting is now, the leger, the sprint, and the agility in these 2 years were probably our best predictors of who made the team. Long jump, sprint, and agility in the next year. You can see this wave of guys that are either stronger one year, more fit. In this block here, we had a kid run a 16 on the beep test. Amazing. We kind of said that's excessive. You know, you don't have to work on that quality anymore. But it's interesting to look at that. When you start taking, 333 of the best hockey players, including in this 2015, the last draft, it was all of them. Like our guys, I can go back and start going, yep, drafted. And we can start looking at where they were drafted, including in that. We need athletes. I'm not saying these guys don't need to specialize. They're very good, but they came back with very specific skills all around athleticism. Daily environment, I think what we look at as the culture is the hardest thing to develop from our aspect. It begins with our coaching group. We try and build a hierarchy without ego. We really, like I said, I can't believe people actually showed up to listen to me speak. We genuinely want to see others succeed. And it's building relationships. I really am, it must be the education degree for me, but I really want athletes that work with us to be very informed. I don't want a bunch of kids that just walk in the weight room and are sitting there going, I don't know what to do because my coach isn't here. That young group I told you about, my young kids that would come in after school, we have a strength and power course that happens every year in May. Guys from all over the world now are starting to show up to hang out with us for a week. We go through courses and we teach really in-depth physiology, take them through our strength and power lab, how we're doing all the analysis of that. And they're all sitting there in the evening and we're all hanging out watching the kids start coming in. And one guy goes, who's training these kids? I said, well, I am. He goes, you look like the laziest trainer in the world. I was like, why? My group over there, they're warming up. That group's on the weight room already lifting. See her? She's helping that one. He goes, what do you mean? I said, they're coached. And they're now educated athletes. They know what their program is. The binder was there. It took us months to get them under the understanding. Here's my warm-up. Here's how I do things. I said, that girl there, I'd let her run a warm-up for any one of my national teams. It was the most beautiful warm-up ever and structured. And they were just making it up. But we built this culture of kids going, hey, I want to be in here. And we told them, there's rules around here. So some of those things we kind of built on would have been, we had daily goals. What's your daily goal? What do you want to do today? Well, I want to lift 5 kilos more in my Olympic lift than I did last day. Awesome. What do you want to do today? I want to work on all my physiotherapy exercises that my physiotherapist gave me. Great. They wrote these goals down in their binder. They had weekly goals. What do you want to accomplish? I want to get 2 more hours of sleep. I'm going to actually put my phone away at night. Awesome, that's a win. So we had buy-in. The presence. Our weight room is no phones. Within reason. Some of the athletes are using it. But we are big on, your phone's not there. Nobody's sitting there tweeting. We will have athletes videoing, especially this year. We loosen up the rules on that because we want promotion of the Olympics. We're excited about that. But we really sat down with this no phones policy. And once again, informed, educated athletes. That's for us is number one. I love the fact that my baseball guy, when I was coming here today, Mike, see you tomorrow? Yep, same time. I got my workout. I got everything written down. I'll text you when I'm done. He texted all his loads in for me, everything he did. Yeah, all good today. Feeling great. That's an informed athlete. I touch a little bit on technology because right now the biggest thing we have is what's happening in the world is everybody wants to monitor everything. And it's for consumer use, like public use. People are picking up HRV for training, all these apps that you can use to monitor. For us, do they have daily decisions being made on them? If it's not, it's research. And there's a role of the strength coach. We don't do it. We have guys in our departments that do research. They're PhDs. Must be used regular and not retrospectively for me to understand why I'm doing things. We determine what matters and measure it. In each program that I write for an athlete, I make sure I know what's the underlying principle I want to get. If it's aerobic base, how am I measuring that? Maybe it is a beep test. We're lucky enough to have a big lab. So I'm going to say, okay, day one, we're going to test this. We'll test it when you come out. Did I get the desired effect? Because if I just say, oh, I'm going to guess that they got fitter, it doesn't work. Can't guess at the Olympics going, well, I hope they're ready to go. So we really look at that. And if it's explosiveness, we measure speed of the bar. Are you actually measuring what you need to measure? Instead of just going, it looks fast. Well, that's great, it looks fast, but so does the guy running a 10-1 and the guy running a 9-9. They both look fast. It always leads to support a well-written program. That's the only reason you're monitoring and adding things into your program. The really interesting one that we use is just test sets. Hey, you got to row 500 meters. We were talking about this before. What's your time on a 500-meter row? Did you get better? Okay, you've got to test lift. You got to do a 4RM. It doesn't have to be really fancy equipment. We use some of the most simple things. One of the best ones, bobsled. Everybody goes, oh, bobsled, they're big, strong. What do they use? Timing lights and a regular med ball. And they throw overhead med ball and underhand med ball. And they measure that once a week. It's the most archaic testing ever, but you know what? It's effective. Oh, they're not throwing as far? In the weight room. Their sprints are going down. They're getting too strong. They're starting to get too bulky. Let's back them off a bit. And it's simple. Everybody goes, what do you mean? You don't take them in the lab and you don't? No. What is readily available and what is cheap? Makes sense. What we really focus on is do not let technology detract you from being a good coach. Because I do see this quite a bit. People walking around, they got their little iPad and they're doing this. There are guys over there doing a deadlift with a beautifully rounded back. He's still, at the end of the day, talk to people. And that's what we really stress on that aspect.